Okay, Dr. Wong, can we start now?
Good morning, Prof.
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and good morning to all. Welcome to seminar Intellectual Discourse, Series 2.0 2021 session. This morning we will have a talk from an experienced lecturer from Singapore. He was a senior research scientist at the National Institute of Education in Nanyang Technological University of Singapore. He is also the managing editor for the Asia Pacific Journal of Education, SSCI. For your information, this seminar will be recorded and published into EduTV in UPM YouTube channel. For those who have attended today's seminar will be given an e-certificate. The link for the Google form will be given through the chat box at the end of this seminar. Without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Wong for his speech. Welcome, Doctor.
Hello, good morning. This is supposed to be a continuation of the speech I had last week, which we couldn't complete because of some of this technical issue. So I mean, for those slides I've covered last week, what happened is that I'm just going to quickly go through them as a recap, and then I will continue from the points we left for more. Okay, so remember last week I talked about this about how we're talking about the nature and nurture to generate a journal-worthy paper, because the study itself is important, and the writing skill is another part. Yeah, both of them actually, of course, they are interconnected. But in the first place, you need to have a good study before you can really write something well. And then even if it's a good study, if you cannot write well, that's not going to work anymore. Anyway, yeah. So you need to do both. Okay. Yeah. So we don't treat it as a summative evaluation, but you can treat it as a formative evaluation. In fact, when you're writing your paper, you're actually kind of start to reorganize your thoughts, all these things, and you might discover something that you never thought of when you are doing your research or when you design your research protocol. Okay, so also talk about, is it only successful studies are journal worthy? I guess gave some counter examples. Yeah, reporting on unsuccessful studies, reporting on some pitfalls of results. All this still can be journal worthy. Yeah. So I also talk about, we try to restrain the scope. We don't try to squeeze everything into one paper. Yeah, you split the materials into multiple papers, or you focus on a small research inquiry. But deep. Yeah, it must be novel, must be highly inspiring. It's not something like printing out another familiar findings that other people already know. You just add up a little bit more, but you didn't actually help much, inspire much. Yeah. Also talk about research gap. It's necessary but insufficient. Research gap itself must be valuable to address. Okay. And also talk about if the study is only relevant to local context. Yeah, how are we going to make it having an international appeal? Yeah, try to connect to international perspective. Okay. And also the next part about choice of journal. Okay, understand individual journals positioning. Yeah, so it's not sufficient by just looking at its name or its theme. Okay, you need to find out more. Check the papers published in the last 3 years, and also check your reference list. Maybe your reference list, you happen to cite quite a number of papers from the same journal, then you want to take a look at it to see whether you want to submit your paper to the same journal. Okay? Yeah, and also consult senior colleagues, or even if you happen to know their editor-in-chief or associate editor of an individual journal, you can check with them. Okay? Send them the paper for their informal feedback before you actually submit it. Okay. Also take note of the word limit, because some of the journals are very particular in their word limit. Yeah, 6,000 words, 6,000 words. Maybe they allow you to stress for 6,100, 6,200. Yeah, but if more than that, 6,500, they revert back to you unless you kind of trim it down to 6,000. But otherwise, we're not going to send it for review. So after a journal is selected, reposition your paper, look at the journal's positioning. You might need to reposition your paper. Yeah. And consider citing a few more papers published in a journal, but don't overdo it. Okay. And I share with you some of my understanding about the positioning of individual journals. Okay, some of these, and also remember taking note of these anti-plagiarism measures. Nowadays, getting more and more. They have been tightening all this. So targeting conference submission, that's a way for you to give yourself a deadline. But at the same time, some top journals are more particular in manuscript originality. They don't even allow high overlapping with a previous conference paper, even though it's from the same team, same authors. So you need to take note of this. And I went into start talking about this writing part. Yeah. So try to arouse readers' interest and curiosity when you set your topic, set your abstract. So key term to use wisely. So a few key terms of your study, and then you try to link them up, reveal their relationship. So a long one is not necessarily a good one, because if you take readers some time for them to get to figure out what you are trying to say, it's not necessarily the best one. Sometimes a shorter one, but then succinct one, but then you point out powerful kind of way of pointing out what are you trying to do and what is your main contribution, and that will be even better. And most editors will select reviewers based largely on the abstract. So the way you write abstract is very important. Okay. Now, if it contains a problem statement, research objective, research method, key findings, and implication, this is something that abstract usually should have. Okay. Yeah. Also, introduction section. Yeah. Recommended problem statement in the first paragraph. I recommend you to write to review the problem statement in your first paragraph. So try to problematize your study well. So what is the problem you're trying to solve? You articulate it in the way that the readers, your potential readers, your potential reviewers, the potential editor thinks that this is crucial, this is valuable. Yeah, so you problematize it in the right way. And then, so also not advisable to put forward a solution before indicating the problem. Usually, I think there in edtech field, there are plenty of authors they like to write papers in a way that they have a very good solution, and then you position in a way that, okay, I have a solution there, and then I'm trying to find a problem to solve it, and I can apply my solution. It's better that actually you start from stating the solution, and then you say, okay, this stating your problem, and then the next point is about solution. Yeah. So okay, and briefly introduce a research design in the last paragraph, because I have read some of the papers that actually never even talk about this, or just one statement. I will recommend at least one short paragraph, 3 to 4 sentences, to talk about this few key information on your study. Don't need to go into the details, because later in the section 3 research design part, you're going to drill into this. But at least give them a very percent information on what this is about, to raise your interest. And then when you look at the literature, when they continue to read the literature review, at least they have a context in mind. They say, okay, you're doing this literature review because you're trying to do this study. Yeah, your study is actually built on this literature review. Because I mean, readers, reviewers, editors, they don't like to have that kind of experience that, okay, I keep reading at first, you talk about this, but you didn't give you too much details, and then I couldn't have a good picture of what you are trying to say. And then you start from introduction, literature review, and then when it comes to research design, you say, okay, this is actually what you are trying to do. Before that, I'm not quite sure what were you trying to do. Yeah, it's very vague. So I just read through literature review, and then because of now you talk about research design, and then I need to go back to read again the introduction, to read again the literature review, so that I can try to make a connection. Actually, we don't like this kind of experience. Yeah, we like all this, your intention, everything is systematically unfolded through introduction, literature review, and research design and research finding. Yeah, it's a bad experience if you force people to actually try to refer back to the previous section, to the previous paragraph. Okay, this is something you need to keep in mind. And literature review, I talk about is review, not just scan. So be critical and try to consolidate and try to synthesize. Yeah, have a dialogue with the literature. Construct a theoretical framework, not just citing relevant prior work. So that was the point I stopped last week. Further and nearer. So I'll talk about the time part. I mentioned about the point that, okay, when you cite, you look at, maybe at the end of your writing, you can look at your reference list, and then you have a sense of if there's anything that you need to improve. But of course, when you're writing, you already need to keep this in mind before you even look at the final reference list. Okay. But at the end, you check your final reference list. That is going to help as well. What the point is that, okay, you might need to cite some literature, maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago, especially when I talk about some of the very long-standing established theoretical framework. You're going to cite Vygotsky, that must be 1970s. Yeah, you're going to cite Piaget, it must be 1980s papers. Yeah, okay, that's fine. But especially in edtech field, all these are many editors and reviewers that have this strong sense that because our field, actually they develop advanced so fast, it's very fast paced. So if your entire reference list looks like you already cite the papers that's 10 years ago, 20 years ago, there's hardly any paper that you cite which are published within the last 5 years, you're going to be in trouble. So some of the reviewers actually, they make it very particular, although I'm not totally agree, but then you better follow it this way anyway. So which means that at least 1/3 of the papers you cited in your full reference list is 5 years, published within the last 5 years. Yeah, so this is something that you may need to try to do to achieve. And then also I talk about locations, because I know in some countries, like let's say for example in Malaysia, I don't see too much cases in Malaysia, but let's say you are Malaysian authors, and then you are very acquainted. You read a lot about Malaysia's past work, I mean the literature published by Malaysian authors. And then you look at this full reference list, and maybe half of them or 2/3 of them are Malaysian authors publication. And then it'll make people feel that this is not quite an internationalized perspective in your, I don't see the kind of international perspective in your paper. So the location itself must be wide enough. So you don't just stick to a particular country, especially your own country that you are familiar with. So this is the part talking about. So, and then the next point, we're talking about the second-hand citations. Yeah. Sometimes you might read, you may not read the paper itself because another paper, let's say a 2015 paper cited another paper published in 2005, 10 years ago. Yeah. And then because you read the 2015 papers, then you cite that piece of you cite the quote, the words, you quote the words, the sentence from the 2005 paper. But because what happens, you actually read the 2015 paper instead. You didn't read the 2005 paper itself. What I mean is that if possible, if you are able to access to that 2005 paper, you better read that paper. You don't have to read the full paper. At least you read that section, you read that paragraph where the sentence you quoted from. Yeah, you at least you need to see what is the context of it. That's very important. So unless it's really the case that this is a very important sentence, but then I just don't have the access to the earliest paper, then what you can do is that in APA, how to cite it, you see, paper A, year, cited by paper B, year. So you have read the paper B, the 2015 paper, but you are actually citing the paper, citing the sentence from the paper A, which was published in 2005. Yeah, so this is the way you're going to write it, but don't do it, don't overdo it. If possible, always try to read the original paper and you cite the original paper rather than citing the paper that cite the original paper. Yeah, so this is something that you need to keep in mind. And we continue with the literature review. Make a judgment before citing a claim in paper, because sometimes I like to see people that say, oh, we said, let's say for example, mobile learning can do this, and or we talk about computational thinking can do this. There are a lot of claims, anecdotal, author's anecdotal assertion or argument. Yeah, so you read the paper, then you can tell that whether this is just their own view, or maybe they cite other people's view, or it's actually evidence-based. It's based on the findings. At least it's an implication of the finding, if not directly straight from findings. So you need to make a judgment. Yeah, so rather than you just maybe the full literature review, half of them is of all these contain all these anecdotal assertion and argument, and then there's no theoretical grounding or whatever. It's just based on their own views or based on their experience and whatever. you try to make it to be more evidence-based if possible. Yeah, cite quotations which are usually evidence-based. Okay, and also you need to strike a balance between general and subject-specific learning theories. Especially, let's say you're doing your studies are actually on applying to a specific subject. Unless your maybe let's say it's a pedagogy that's subject matter independent, then you can be less subject specific in a sense in terms of citing the learning theories. But when you come to something like you are doing a science study or doing a language study, you better just do this you better do literature review, not just on general learning theories such as constructivist theory, social cultural perspective, but you also look into subject specific learning theories. Science inquiry learning, is there any theoretical grounding behind scientific inquiry? Is there any theoretical grounding behind, let's say, second language acquisition? So that's actually a full set of theories behind that. So you need to strike a balance between these two. And also unpack background concept if needed. Consider all this using footnotes. Sometimes because if you look, let's say you talk about IC, I mean there are some terms, concepts or terms. Let's say we're talking about ICT, of course everybody knows what's ICT, so you don't need to explain what's ICT in general sense. Yeah, depending on the target audience. So if this is a concept that your potential target audience, it means that which journal you're going to submit to. Because some journal they have a specific audience. So you look at your potential audience and you decide whether there's anything you need a specific definition or explanation of specific concept. So when you need it, you do explanation. But otherwise, you cannot make assumptions that everybody certainly know this. Yeah. So even when talking about this, is the same thing that I'm doing all this webinar speech or talking about let's say I conducting workshop. I've been conducting teachers PD workshop over the last few months. And usually when I'm talking about, let's say when you're talking about inquiry learning, most of the teachers who participate in my workshop actually know what it is. So when I mention inquiry learning, I don't need to explain too much. But let's say when I talk about flipped classroom, I cannot assume that all teachers who attend my workshop know what flipped classroom is. Maybe half of them know, half of them don't know, or some of them have heard of it, but don't know what it is. So I need to make some quick explanation of what is flipped classroom before I move on. So this is the same principle when you write paper. Predict what kind of audience you are going to, your paper is going to be read, right? And unpack concepts, explain concept if necessary. But sometimes if you just are going to jump up and try to explain the specific concept, it might actually disrupt the narrative flow. So what you can do is to add footnotes as a definition or whatsoever. This is something that's going to help. Well, you can continue with the original narrative flow as though you didn't explain it, but explain it as a footnote. But also you need to check. Some journals may not allow footnote. So you just check the kind of author's guidelines of the journal and decide what you're going to do. And also, once select a focusing conceptual framework, make sure connecting all other concepts to it. So we have an example, which I can share with you. They talk about in the literature review section. I read some of the papers. A paper talking about this. We had a study. This is a pedagogy method, a mobile learning mobile language learning method underpinned by constructivism. Okay, students are supposed to construct knowledge, and then I talk about what's constructivism. Students construct knowledge together, alone or together, and so on and so forth. The entire literature review, half of them is talking about constructivism. Then later, when I look at the way they assess the students in their experiment, they just assess their language skills and also their preference, their perception, which means that you survey them and say, okay, do you like this? Do you want to continue with this in the future? All these things. And all this assessment, evaluation has nothing to do with constructivism. So this is so that's something I would call the idiom or the proverb of English proverb. We say talk the talk but not walk the walk. Yeah. So you're talking about one thing, but then you're doing something else. So you need to be able to make sure that from your introduction to literature review to your research question, research design, and findings and implication, all these things is supposed to be coherent. You are talking about the same thing. Yeah, not going to running around talking about different things and then you bring them together. Okay, and then we come to theoretical underpinning. You try to synthesize. Usually, we will strongly recommend you for most type of paper you're submitting to SSCI journal. They want to look at whether there's a theoretical underpinning. It's not just talking about, okay, this is theoretical routine, but they want to see a theoretical framework. Can you actually distill a theoretical framework, construct theoretical framework out of your literature review, and use that to guide your research design and or your research analysis, data analysis. So what you can do is that synthesize one or more theories or framework to form your own research framework. Yeah, next slide, I'm going to show example. And then you also try to avoid reverse engineering for most cases, because you know there are actually something we call data-driven and theory-driven. Theory-driven, it means that you already did literature review, you construct a theory, and you make a theory to inform your research design, and maybe if it's an interventions research, your pedagogical design. Yeah. And then from then, you also make use of that theory to inform your data analysis. That's called theory-driven. But there's also another type, data-driven. You collect all the data and then you analyze it, you have finding, and you make use of that to explain theory. For some cases, you can, but then for most of the, especially for interventionist study, we don't recommend using this kind of data-driven research. Yeah, you try to position your paper or at least package your paper in a theory-driven way. Of course, there are very highly quantitative studies. Like say, for example, some of the survey study, it can be data-driven, but that's a very rare case. In most cases, we will recommend you to do it in a theory-driven way. And thoroughly learned. Okay, I highlighted this as a present perfect tense, learned and understood a theory before referencing it. So let me give you one example. There was a study on, I used to review a paper, and I know it's a student paper. There was a study on the so-called task-based language learning. That is a kind of an established language learning method. Yeah, so the idea is that when I look at the design was that the student actually developed a mobile app, game app to learn English vocabulary. Okay, and what happened is that in the game is something like a virtual world that the player look at this virtual world, and maybe it's a room or maybe it's a garden or whatever. Then they see some of the objects there, hanging around. So the task, the so-called task, because it's called task-based, okay, they're supposed to be learning tasks. The learning task is to use a gun. Of course, it's a virtual gun because it's a game. The virtual gun to shoot the object off down, and then there'll be a question jump up for you to test your vocabulary, English vocabulary. So they claim that this is called task-based language learning. They said, okay, when I look at this, we realize that you actually don't have a proper understanding of what is meant by task-based language learning, because the actual task-based language learning, if you read the literature, task-based language, the tasks they're referring to the tasks which they're supposed to be authentic. These are language communication tasks among language students. That's called task learning, language tasks. So there's supposed to be some communication among human students, human language students. Yeah, so they have a very strict definition of what's meant by task and why they want to define it that way, because there are some pre-task and post-task then that actually tap on the task to link to the language learning outcome. But the student, they just look at task and then say, okay, this is called task, or whatever things I do in my game is called learning task. So you need to have a thorough understanding of what a specific concept, a specific pedagogy is before you actually make use of it to frame your research. Now, remember this point. Research framework. This is a very famous very famous framework, which I think most of you who actually, if you have read enough, these are learning theory papers, you know, this is called activity theory. So what happened here is, look at this activity theory. This is almost 30 or 40 years old, very well cited and widely used in analyzing some of these our relationship between the kind of environment, learning environment that make use of ICT. Okay, so the way you do is that at least a set of design principles. So if possible, you come up with something like this. That means that there are a few concepts, and then you try to link up and describe the relationship. Yeah, based on whatever theory that you already know. A few theories that actually talking about individual relationship, but you actually piece them up to come up with a new framework. But if not a full framework, at least maybe we're talking about intervention research, a research with pedagogy, then you come up with a set of lesson design principles, learning design principles, pedagogical design principles, yeah, which is also rooted in theories. The framework can use to inform the study. There are possible ways I mentioned just now. Extract a few key academic concepts from the literature and figure out their relationships presented in a diagram. All this must be theory rooted. This is one way to come up with research framework. This is a research framework I came up in one of my study, which last week I talked about a paper I published in the Communicar, that journal, Communicar. I don't have time to go through the details, but I just quickly tell you what happened is this, because this is the background is more on how to use social media to facilitate socialized language learning. Now, with all these things that come together, and then you see there's a social practice, a social media space where individual students, they may just post whatever we call meaning making, we're coming together. And then there's also in the informal context, the students, maybe they can post something that from their daily life, like on Facebook, you're publishing, you're posting status updates. But we make use of that kind of status update in the to actually to use the language, target language. So instead of, let's say for this case of the students supposed to use Chinese as a second language in Singapore, most of the students in their daily life, they use English, but then I place them into a social media space where they're supposed to use Chinese, so they have to use Chinese to create their status update and post it on it. So this becomes some of this we call it socially authentic artifacts, because the student created all these artifacts from their daily life. But there's also another type, the teacher create learning intended artifacts, which is also another type of status update. But these are some of the learning tasks that the students are supposed to do. They post it on it, and then they bring into the same space for it. So I'm talking about how these different types of artifacts that come together in the play, and also how to convert a socially authentic artifacts into a learning intended artifacts. So I have all this description of how all this mechanism works. So this is what happened, that I construct a design framework from here. Okay, and research design and findings. So after we come up with the framework, then we start to do research design. If this is an intervention study, explain the pedagogical lesson design clearly before describing the detailed research design. I have been reviewing quite a number of papers that I realized that they only spend about one paragraph to talk about the pedagogy, and then they spend one full page. They give one full page to explain, one or two full page to explain the research design. And then the findings could be 3 to 4 pages, and all this very complex, very high level, kind of those analysis. Actually, they want to show off how good they are, how strong they are in their quantitative analysis. Now, all these very high level techniques that probably only a few graduate students know how to do that. But then I said, actually, your main contribution of these studies is supposed to be the innovative pedagogy itself. It's not the findings. The findings itself is just happen to evaluate, to assess, to prove that the pedagogy worked well. But then you only spend half a paragraph to talk about the pedagogy. And then you just throw in a few big terms, like say, but I remember one of the papers I read is about they are using the wiki to do collaborative writing in academic writing class. And then they just throw a few big words, this is a study about a constructivism, and then this is a constructivist way of social constructivist way of writing, and then this is a writing that actually connect to authentic, right? So they just throw in a few big terms there, but then they actually didn't go into details of what this pedagogy is about, that the process is about. Nothing much. They're just talking about this, and then they jump into the research design. I said, actually, I was very tempted to reject this paper. Even though it looks like it's so excellent, that analytical skill, the statistical analysis it is. They just show up how good your skill is, but you never really convince me what is the big deal about your study. So you need to remember this point. Yeah, explain the core things, which is the pedagogical design in this case, clearly before you talk about research design. This is more important. This is your main contribution. Main contribution is pedagogy. It's not showing off how good your skills are. Yeah. So there are also cliches in research design. This one I don't need to go into too much detail because it's about sometimes it can be good design because there are some studies that over relying on self-reported data. You just get student interview and then or you just survey the students, even if it's an intervention study, a pedagogical study. Yeah, some pedagogical study they didn't even do pre and post test. They just do a self-reported data kind of analysis. Yeah, they just get student interview or they just do survey, and then you say, okay, the student say, oh, I like this very much. I want to continue to use this. Yeah, this is something that is really very weak. Yeah, so you need to take note, don't over rely on self-reported data unless the nature of your study itself is purely self-reported. Like say, for example, you're doing a big scale questionnaire study of 1,000 students, 1,000 teachers, or so on and so forth, and that's probably okay. But if you really want to target for really high level kind of journal, like say, for example, educational psychology, this is the #1 journal in the educational psychology field. And we can tell that educational psychology, this study, they have a tradition of doing very strong quantitative study. There's only in recent years they start to look into qualitative aspect as well. Most of the time they are pure quantitative studies, pure statistical study, doing big scale survey findings, all this to prove some of the psychological theories. But even in recent years, the educational psychologists, they make it clear that if you only based on one single data set, which is say, for example, you do a big scale, 10,000 sample size of this survey study, chances are that are still going to reject a paper, no matter how good it is, how big a sample size is. Now, because I want to have at least two data sets, interview or whatsoever, yeah, to triangulate your statistical your survey findings. So they ask for at least two different types of data to put together, to analyze together, to synthesize them. Yeah, so this is what they are asking for. So you don't just over relying on self-reported data. That's the main point. Also, there's unvalidated research instruments. They just use maybe they just use surveys without validated one. If you need to find out what's meant by validated survey, maybe you need to go back to your to look at your these are research methodology books, textbooks. Yeah, you don't know what it is, but you need to be. This is strongly recommend to use validated research instrument if possible. And also, there are some edtech journal papers which I've been reviewing. They're looking at, they come out with very sophisticated these are technological design, but then at the end when they do this evaluation, they only do a very simple user acceptance test or technological acceptance model. There are some of the validated instruments, survey instrument, yeah, to test whether a few users they come together, potential users. Okay, these are the students who use, or these are tools for teachers who use. Or get a few students or teachers to try out, and then they fill out user acceptance test whether I like it, whether I think this is user friendly, whatever. Yeah, even though these instruments are already validated, but this is not enough because as educational researchers, even though you're focusing on edtech, we're interested in finding out whether your solution is really educationally effective. It's not about whether the technology is good, whether the technology is user friendly. That is just one aspect, and that's not a sufficient aspect. So that's why a lot tech journals they do not accept papers on study with only this type of test, but they don't do, or they do very simple pilot study which is not convincing about that educational effectiveness at all. So this is something you also need to take note. And also just showing off sophisticated analytics skill, but not hitting the target. This is the point that I mentioned just now is very similar. You have a very strong analytics skill, and then I remember I reviewed one paper, another paper I reviewed before. So this is apparently, again, this is something a student. This is not a graduated professor, whoever. She wrote this paper. The entire paper is about analyzing her own experience in or her own activities for 1 full year in an online educational forum. So interact with other people and all this. They do all this. She collected all this information about herself, her own, and she did all this very sophisticated analysis. I think that she used at least 10 different high level statistical technique, and I haven't heard of half of them at all. Yeah, it looks very sophisticated, and all this analysis they come out all this, and but then I still very tempted to reject this paper because I don't see the significance there. I just asked her, this looks like a paper which is excellent. If you are going to submit it as a year-end assessment work for your assignment, yeah, for your quantitative analysis course. Yeah, but doesn't sound like a valuable academic paper because I don't see why you do all this and then you don't actually tell me much about how to improve education. What are the education is about? So more important thing is you need to hit the core, the target. Remember, yeah, analytical skill is not sufficient. You can do very simple analysis, but then you come up with very valuable findings that are going to inform education or inform theory, if not informing practice. So also another point, even if a quantitative driven study is good to collect, analyze supplementary qualitative data to explain finding and enrich discussion and vice versa. So this is something we call mixed method, but you don't use the mixed method the word kind of in a loosened sense, because when you talk about mixed method, it's not just you're doing quantitative and qualitative, but then you analyze it separately. You never put them together. Only when you need to quantitative analysis finding and qualitative analysis finding, you need to cross-reference it. You need to do triangulation. You put them together, synthesize the findings. Then you can call it mixed method. If you analyze separately, that's not mixed method. Okay, ensure coherence between theoretical underpinning, research question, and research. This is the point I mentioned just now, coherency across all the sections. And then we come to discussion side. We have something we call a skeleton. If we call research framework as a skeleton, you need to come up with a skeleton. Otherwise, your study, you are going to collapse. Yeah, without a skeleton, yeah, you cannot stand still. And then the research design and finding is your body, but your discussion and implication, that part is actually the soul, because that's the part you're going to highlight the value of your study. Ultimately, the value is the core. So in most quality journal papers, the discussion section can cover 20% of the main body. Yeah, so this is something that you may need to take note. If let's say there's an 8,000 word paper, maybe at least 2,000 words, at least 1,500 words is a discussion, dedicated to discussion. Okay, and offer the most crucial new ideas and enlightenment. After the readers read it, oh, that's wow. There's a wow factor there. There are take-home messages there. Yeah, I really learned from them. I really inspired by you. Yeah, rather than something like, okay, this is just another thing that it looks familiar. You just improve a little bit, a micro improvement of whatever I already know, but it doesn't help me much. I think the best compliment to an author is that after I read your paper and then it inspired me to come up with another research idea and then want to do research by building on your study. That's really a good compliment, and you want to work towards that. And more interpretative than descriptive on research findings. So don't just repeat and rephrase introduction and findings. It's not just talking about what, but also how and why. And also, just like I talked about, you try to not to quote or cite too much about too many anecdotal claims. But at the same thing, you try to avoid making anecdotal claims. All the new claims should be implied for research finding and or prior literature. You can relate to prior literature. Sometimes you say, okay, this is finding actually define the prior findings of this disease. Then analyze why there's a difference between now and then. Yeah, so these are things you can do. And also, so this is all the point I make, citing prior literature. So you don't cite too many prior literature at this discussion side, but then you do it whenever necessary. So you try to relate, okay, this is finding that actually echo whatever finding, but if you do this echoing too much, then you say, okay, you're doing things that other people already done. Yeah, people can also question you in this. Now, you cite it sparingly. They said you prove this, but then I will I stretched it, I extend my finding. I telling more about what the previous study have already found. Or if you actually contradict, just like I mentioned, if you contradict with previous finding and analyze why there's a difference between this. Yeah, so these are things you can try out. So you don't cite too many trial literature publications, trial publications. But when you cite it when it's necessary. Now, discussion and recommendations. Summarize research objective, key findings, and indications, academic contributions, limitation, recommendation, future work. This is something we already know. No more new evidence. When you come to the, sorry, this is not discussion. This should be conclusion and recommendation. Yeah, so I need to change this. Conclusion and recommendations. Yeah, so no more new evidence in the conclusion section. Okay, and future recommendations. You shouldn't treat it as just slogans. You're really seriously thinking about you want to do that. Okay, yeah, so you need to come up with a good recommendations that people think that you are really serious about them. Okay, and before submitting the manuscript, after completion, we call it sleep on it. Not just for 24 hours. You sleep on it for 48 hours. Means you leave it in your laptop, or maybe you leave it in your drawer. Yeah, keep it for 48 hours without looking at it. Unless you're really hurry, you need to rush for submitting the paper because you're under pressure to publish more in a short period of time. But otherwise, sleep on it for 48 hours. Yeah, don't read it anymore. Don't think about it anymore. Do something else for 48 hours, and then you come back to revisit it. Reread it. When you revisit it, reread it at least 3 times. Check the organization, logic, and grammar. Now you have a little bit of distance from whatever written. You are no longer that engaged and engrossed in writing the paper anymore. Yeah, and then you can look at it more from a outsider's point of view. Yeah. Then you try to be more succinct. Omit text segments which do not value add, redundant, duplicating, yeah, or something that you write down. Maybe there's something new, but then it doesn't really value add to your entire narration. So be succinct. That's the important point. And also try to read aloud at least one to see whether you need to improve the grammar, improve your smoothness of the language. There are things you can do. And make sure all the co-authors have gone through the manuscript, because all of them are responsible for the content. You don't just submit because they say, okay, I agree to be a co-author, or because you are my co-supervisor, so I have to put your name there. But then if you don't have time, you don't need to read. I mean, this is not a good thing. Okay. If the time permits, invite other colleagues or peers to go through the draft or the final article and give comments. Yeah, you can try that. Okay. Now I come to the language part. First of all, one core concept per paragraph and one small concept per sentence. Yeah, so this is the main point. You don't squeeze in too many concepts in one paragraph. You don't squeeze in too many concepts within a sentence. But you also need to avoid writing very short paragraph, 1 to 2 sentence paragraph, because that looks more like a news article rather than, because in news article they prefer to write only 1 to 2 sentences in a paragraph. If you go back to read English papers, yeah, you will see that English newspaper, yeah, you will see this kind of thing, news article. But then when it comes to this academic writing, they'll prefer longer paragraph, but not over long. Still one concept per paragraph. And avoid compound sentences. Shorter sentences, greater readability. I can show you some examples of compound sentences. Try to break long sentences, speak long sentences if possible. So that's why I mentioned one small concept per sentence. Okay. Avoid using because, and also, but as a sentence openers. You don't start with because, you don't start with and, you don't start with also, you don't start with but as a sentence openers. Yeah. Okay. If you want to use but, you use however, nevertheless instead. Say for example, yeah, because you can use since. Yeah. And use an example of compound sentences. You look at this. I give you 30 seconds to go through this. In order to deliver the synergy of OCL improving oral communication competence while acquiring cultural knowledge, this study, by combining the Delphi technique with a user involvement approach in intersubjectivity agreements, explores the need for team-based online courses to implement oral communication, focusing on Chinese daily culture and the requirements for content development of non-sync multimedia in order to construct an online team-based collaborative learning system with a built-in rich internet application. This one is 73 words, if I remember correctly. One sentence, 73 words. One sentence. See how we're going to break it down, split it into 2 sentences. If you read this, you really think that how are you going to decode this in your mind? Now, readability is very low. See what I did. improving, I changed to enhance. I think this is a more proper term. In order to deliver synergy and okay, this study combined the Delphi technique and so on and so forth, which implement oral communication focusing on Chinese daily life. And then I break it down. Additionally, the study examining, because over here they have this and on Chinese and the requirements. So I split it into two sentences. From the end part and the requirements for content development, I changed it to additionally the study examine. So it's split into two sentences with about 30 words each. And I can even further split it down into 3 sentences. See how it goes. This study aimed to deliver the okay? And then I realized that there's actually a redundancy. I told you, try to be succinct. So this word actually redundant with the previous sentence, the first sentence. So actually I can delete this. And I further split the first sentence into 2 sentences. And particularly the thing, to accomplish this is how I actually split it into 2 sentences. You try this way. Now it's about 20 words per sentence. Okay. So the readability, of course, it enhances a lot. And another example I can show you here, environmental interactions. This is more about learning activity, field trip, with physical and social element of the outdoor learning context. For example, interviews with tourists, calculation in gradient with slopes, another such as IE, okay, IE to practice geography, that is to practice geographic and mathematical skills, design thinking attractions, accessibility and amenities of the island, foster real-world application and acquisition of skills individually and collectively. You realize that there are examples inserted in between, but this example is way too long. It's not just a few words. It's about 20 words there in between. So what you can do is that you just take this example up and becomes the second sentence. These interactions include, for example, interview with tourists. So actually, I take this out and put it as a separate sentence. This is something you can do. You try to revise it. Continue language. Consistently use UK or US spelling. You choose UK or US spelling, either one of them, and then consistently use it throughout the entire paper. Use acronyms sparingly. Don't use too many acronyms. Otherwise, you also result in lower readability. Take note of the use of tenses. So let's say, for example, in literature review, if you want to you want to cite previous publications, either you use present tense all the while or use past tense all the while. Like Vygotsky mentions and then Piaget remarks. So, for example, you want to use present tense, you use present tense all the way. You want to use past tense, you use past tense all the way. Don't mix. And when you come to description, when you talk about, let's say, talking about actual pedagogical activities, for those cases, if you are describing things that are already done before because you already finished your study, then you always use past tense. But sometimes you want to describe, okay, the pedagogical design looks like this. The teacher, first you get the student to do this, and then the student, second step, the student do this. So this description is more on general sense. In the future, if other people want to apply your pedagogy, you can do the same thing. So in this case, you can use present tense. So you need to use the tenses in the right way. And then uncountable nouns, research and feedback, they are often being used, often being added as a researchers, or feedbacks. But these are usually uncountable nouns. So research is research, feedback is feedback. So you don't say, I receive feedbacks. Okay, I receive feedback, that's all, uncountable. And if you really want to talk about their multiple research studies, then you just use studies or research studies, but you don't use many researchers. You just use many research studies, that's fine. Okay, and also avoid colloquial expressions. Isn't, wasn't, it's, these are colloquial, not in academic writing. You use is not, was not, it is. And a whole lot becomes numerous, around the corner, upcoming. So these are avoid expressions which avoid colloquial. Use it in more formal terms. Chance favors a prepared mind, that's what they say. Read more literature as a critical reader. Attempt to connect seemingly unrelated concepts, so try to read more. And also cross-disciplinary thinking. And also find opportunities to review papers where the chance. If possible, read other. So because let's say you're invited to review papers, either for journal or for conference. Then when you make a submission, sometimes in some of these their submission system, they will send a automatic notification, email notification to the reviewer say, okay, we have made a decision that this paper is being accepted or this paper rejected or major revision. Thank you for your help. And then these are all 3 reviewers' comments, and you read this reviewer's comment, then you can understand, okay, these are the things that other reviewers have seen but you didn't see, you learn from them. Okay. And invite established researchers to critique your papers or even invite them to collaborate. And even one of my colleagues told me that her experience that in the past she had been inviting some of the very established researchers to be their co-authors, and then they finished almost they come out their first drop their paper and get their collaborating authors to come in to comment and then to make improvement, and maybe the authors will help them to write certain sections, so that they become a proper co-authors. But her experience is that often when her collaborator may come in to tell her, they said, okay, you should have done this during you should have collect this piece of data during your study, then it will help you to even strengthen your analysis. They say, oh, I should have done that. So in the future, when I'm doing my new research, I start working with this co-author. I come up with a design idea, I come up with the with the outline of the paper, and then I give the collaborator for her comment. And maybe the collaborator will come in and tell you that, okay, you collect another piece of data, then it will help you in your paper writing. So you want to do it before you even start the study rather than at the end of the study. So this is something that you can also try out. Okay, I think that's all I have to share with you. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Wong, for the informational sharing. I hope that all the knowledge that has been shared will give benefits to all of us. I would like to thank all the participants that have joined today's seminar, and I wish you have a good day ahead, and please stay safe. Thank you. The link Google form I will upload at chat box. Wait,
Someone want to ask question?
Yeah, I was about to ask whether it's possible to ask questions.
Yes.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I don't mind staying on for a while longer. Yeah, so if you're happy to, if you prefer to stay, that's fine. And can ask question, please. Yeah, although okay, so you can ask question, but there's no question to ask, is it?
Okay, I have a question.
Sure.
Okay, my question is very actually straightforward because for starters like PhD students, we're supposed to write journal articles. So for beginners like us, would you suggest us to go straight to the topic? I mean, journal that actually narrow down to our topic of research, or should we go to like a more general or like journal that accept multidisciplinary, like for example computer and education, they accept different types of papers, and also like not necessarily to be Q1, but there are 2 types of journals nowadays that I can tell. They have, one is actually we can focus on the one that we are doing in our research, and another one is actually accepting all kinds of papers in education. What is your opinion on that?
I think it will depending on the nature of the study, or the nature of the content of the paper you're going to publish, or the positioning. Yeah, so it depends. Or sometimes, although there's a very specific type of research paper, but because I used to have experience of working with being a collaborator, a co-author of someone else who had done their own study. Like for this example, is that this professor, young professor, he did a study on reading comprehension by using this mind mapping. Yeah, so he did a study on some of the educational psychology aspect of it. Yeah, so it looks like multidisciplinary because it not only talk about reading comprehension pedagogy, but it also talk about educational psychology aspect. They come in together. But then I look at this, I think they are actually he's not really a very expert type of researcher in this field. He's just trying out this idea. It looks innovative from an outsider's point of view for a non-expert, non-reading instruction expert's point of view. Yeah, but then it looks innovative from other people to see. So although I say, okay, if you are not really in a hurry to publish papers so soon, let's try from some of the top tier reading instruction journals, journals on reading instructions. Yeah, so we tried a couple of them and realized that it's keep being rejected even before it's sent for. There's only one that actually sent for review, but the other two they just straight away rejected. Because they not only some things I saw some of these limitations in the research design, which also same experience I faced. When I read his paper, I tried to help him improve paper. I said, you should have done this, you have done that, but you didn't. Studies over, you cannot redo it. Then I have to live with whatever you have right now. And then I see this as a limitation, which the reviewers will question, well, we just try our luck. So, but what happens is that, so we received some of these comments from the editor. They're saying that either because of that limitations in the research design itself, but they also think about, okay, this doesn't seem like very much adhere to whatever we know about this the theoretical framework behind this reading instruction is not strong enough. From the expert point of view, their theoretical routing is very much stronger in it. Yeah, so that means that unless you are very, very clear that whatever you study, okay, you have a very strong theoretical grounding, which is something that if you submit to this particular journal with all the experts in this field, in this journal, you can stand their test, then you try that. But otherwise, if it's something that is you're not really very strong in your theoretical grounding, it just maybe it's innovative, then you can try other journals which you can avoid all these aspects in the same field. Yeah, in the pedagogy, this particular pedagogy or in this particular content, subject matter, education. Yeah, so this is something that you need to consider. Yeah, I hope this is something that can help you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Yeah, sure. Okay, a few other questions on the chat. I think please recommend some books you can read for writing a good systematic with. This one I haven't really come across before. Yeah, I know one of my colleagues actually he run a course, 13-week course for our PhD student, but that's in NIE in my institute. So if you want to find out, I can try to search or ask my colleague who can recommend, but maybe not on top of my head right now. And then we will upload on okay. I would like to ask whether the theoretical and the conceptual framework is necessary to be included when we write journal article. Then depends on the nature of the study, which I strongly recommend that you at least you have some theoretical grounding, if not a conceptual framework being developed. But usually a theoretical framework, even without a diagram, you just describe a few main key relationships. Let's say a few key concepts and the relationship between this concept, that's already considered a conceptual framework. And in most top tier SSCI journals, reviewers, editors are very particular in the theoretical routing. So that's at least the things you need to do. Yeah, only in a very rare cases where you can justify that you can do data-driven study. Yeah, then you can do that. But otherwise, try to come up with conceptual framework. Okay. Okay, the link and then think around. Okay. No other question from chat right now. So anyone want to ask further question? Hey, no more. Yeah.
Dr. Wong,
Yes.
I don't have any more questions. I just like to compliment you for your easy style of presenting. Your sharing is from the heart, and
Thank
my
you.
students enjoy it. And we hope to hear from you because I think it was really very, very enlightening. You make it really simple and really practical. Thank you, Prof. Wong, for
Thank you.
inviting Dr. Wong.
Okay, so yeah, thank you. Thanks for being with us. Yeah. So I guess that's all for now.
Doctor?
Yeah.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
Yeah, just now you show when you submit your manuscript, before you submit your manuscript, you leave your paper at least 48 hours, right? So you give us that skill, but could you might share more about how you proofreading your manuscript before you do submit your paper?
Yeah, I think that was the point I made. Okay. Yeah, I think the point I made just now, already made that point just now. If I go back to the slide. Where is it? I think these are the few points I can share with you right now. Let me share again. Share. Yeah. So these are the three key points I share with you. Yeah. So these are the things you're supposed to do. I'm not talking about the language polishing yet, because language polishing, if you need help, of course you need to get professional editors help, language editors help. Yeah, but otherwise, at least these are the three things you need to do. And I would strongly recommend you look into this. The second point: be succinct. There are plenty of writers, even myself, in the past and even nowadays. Sometimes I just write too much because I have too many things in my mind. But then when you really come down into paper writing, you need to make it succinct. Try not to be redundant, because maybe you have redundant points to make across the same paragraph, or even across the same section, or maybe even across different sections. Yeah. So when you have a chance to actually read through from the first sentence to the last sentence in one shot, then maybe you will detect all this kind of duplicated, redundant exclamation, redundant articulations. Yeah, that's where you can try to keep things simple. Yeah. So again, readers like simple but and yet complete. These are content. Yeah, rather than you just keep keep rumbling, talking about the same thing all the while. Yeah, so this is essentially what I can share with you.
Doctor?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, as a second English learner, I try to do this because I have a manuscript at hand. I try to do this. Actually, I have lived my paper few weeks. I try to do that, but I didn't do a lot correction proofread about my manuscript. So except I submit to my supervisor. My supervisor give me some ideas. Do you have any good ways to proofreading fasten your proofreading? I'm
What
not
you're
sure.
asking for?
I want to know. Do you have the other ways to accelerate your the process of proofread your papers?
Yeah, I think if you can do these 3 points, I think it's good enough. Yeah, you try to make sure that you do this. That is already good enough. Yeah, but otherwise the rest will be really depending on the study itself. Is quality. You're having the quality of the study itself. Yeah. So this is something that you can't do at this point of time, because you already finished your study and this is what you have reported. But otherwise, at least in terms of writing part, these are the 3 things you need to do. Yeah, you can do to make it a better paper, better writing itself.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So no other question? Yeah. So if no, then we'll say bye to everybody. Yeah, is it okay, Kai?
Yeah, Doctor. Okay. If no more question to ask to Dr. Wong, I will end the session. Thank you, Dr. Wong, for the informational sharing. I hope that all the knowledge that has been shared will give benefits to all of us. Okay. Again, I would like to thank all to the participants that have joined today's seminar, and I wish you have a good day ahead. And please stay safe. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.